Hello and welcome to another video on real-time interview questions on QA profile. So this is the continuation video of the Selenium interview questions which we have discussed in the previous videos. So let's continue with our questions. The later one we have, what is the syntax for CSS Selector in the Selenium? Until now we have seen how to write Xpaths in different ways using the multiple keywords like following, preceding, descendant and all. So now we will be seeing how to write the CSS selector in the different formats. So first is by using the ID. So for the CSS selector, if you want to use the ID, we can write it as CSS equals to tag followed by hash with the ID value. So whenever you are using ID in your CSS selector, we have to use the hash symbol followed by that ID value to recognize that web element. And when we are trying to use the class name of that particular web element in the CSS selector, we have to use the dot symbol followed by the class name of that web element. And when we are trying to use any other attribute, then we can use as tag followed by the attribute equals to value in that square bracket. We do have the other format of the CSS which is by using the substring. So in the Xpath we have used the starts with and contains when we know there is a particular word which is common for that attribute. So in the similar way, for the CSS selector, when we see any of the attribute is common, we can use that particular text in the below format. So it is of tag followed by attribute and cap symbol with the attribute value. And this is used when you are trying to use the prefix of that attribute value. And we can also write it as attribute dollar and the suffix of the string value. Sorry, it is not prefix, it is the suffix here. So when we want to use the suffix of that attribute value, we can use this format of tag, attribute and the dollar sign. So when we want to use the prefix, we will be using the cap symbol, and for the suffix value, we will be using the dollar symbol. Sometimes we can use the inner text of that element to find that web element. So in that case, you can write the CSS as CSS equals to tag colon followed by contains text. So this is the syntax for writing the Xpath in multiple ways in Selenium. Next we have how to move to nth child element. So in the web element, we can have the multiple div tags which are matching for us. And what if we want to move to the second matching div tag? Using the Xpath, you can write it as div of 2. And in the similar way, using the Xpath, you can write it as div column followed by nth child of 2. If you want to go to the second match, it is of 2 here. And if you want to go to the third match, it will be 3 here. So this is the format to find any of the nth child web element in the HTML DOM. The later one is what is difference between Xpath and CSS selector. So till now we have seen how to write the Xpath, what are the different Xpaths we have and how can we locate the dynamic web elements using the Xpaths, and also we have seen how to write the CSS selector in different ways. Now let's see what is the difference between the CSS selector and the Xpath basically. First, both are used to locate the web element for us. So that is what they basically do. But the main difference is that using the Xpath, you can go forward and backward. So in the previous slides, we have seen, so here using this parent tag and the ancestor tag and the following tag, what we are doing is we are traversing forward of the web element and backward of the web element. But when you see in the CSS selector here, we can only move to the forward direction of that web element. So we can't traverse in backward for the web element. So that is the main difference between the Xpath and the CSS selector. So in Xpath, you can traverse forward and backward for any of the web element, but in the CSS selector, you can traverse only forward for that web element. As we discussed in the previous slides, IE doesn't have the default engine, so that is the reason why the Xpath which we have written for any of the particular browser, might not work in this IE browser. But when you write the CSS selector, it is same across all the browsers. It doesn't need the Xpath engine to identify. So the CSS selector which you have written in any of the browser will work in all the browsers. But for the Xpath, there is a chance that it might not work in the IE browser. And the later one is Xpath has various ways of finding the web element compared to the CSS selector. So here you can see that for finding the dynamic web element, we have multiple ways using the Xpath. But in the CSS selector, we have limited options to find any of the web element. And the last one is Xpath engine is different in each browser, but CSS is same in all the browsers. So as we discussed in the second point, it is the same. Xpath engine is different for each of these browsers, but the CSS will always be same for any of the browsers. So let's stop here for this video and let's continue the remaining questions in the coming up videos. Thanks for watching the video. Hope you learned something new today. If you find this video helpful, please like and share it with your friends. And please do subscribe for more content like this.